There's Kyle. Great.
No, Peter.
Okay, everybody ready to go? All right, go ahead and let everyone in. Well, everybody keep an eye out for Laura, and when she joins, can you spotlight her and pin her? Okay, here we go. Help me admit people too, please. Welcome everybody to the March 2025 edition of Streets for All Happy Hour. We are so excited to have a longtime friend of Streets for All, Laura Friedman, with us, now Congresswoman Friedman from the 30th District. Before we get to our conversation with the Congresswoman, we're going to give you an update on our efforts in Sacramento. A lot of HLA news today. We'll go over some of that, an update on the City of LA budget, our neighborhood council elections work, and go over a few wins and fails of the month. I'm going to pass over to Mark to talk about our state update. Mark.
Awesome. Sorry, man, it's a little bit rough here, but thank you, everyone. Mark Fuchsovich, I'm Director of State Policy for Streets for All. Yeah, happy to share the state bills. This is the bills in the state legislature that we are sponsoring this year and introducing to the world. So next slide, please. These are the bills. We have 8 sponsored bills in the legislature with a diverse set of authors and a diverse set of topics. We're working on bills in the housing space. We're working on bills in the street safety space, in the transit permitting space. We're dealing with all of the growing pains that e-bikes are experiencing. We're trying to tackle a lot, and all of it in the forward direction of improving our transportation and land use systems to have better transit, better mobility, and safer streets. So if anyone has any questions or wants to learn more, these all exist on our state webpage, or feel free to just email me and happy to chat. Next slide, please. All of our bills are in the first House Policy Committee. So that's going to be kind of going on the next sort of month or so in the legislature before bills head to either their second policy committee or appropriations committee. And then any assembly bill then has to go to the Senate or vice versa. But we're right now in the early stages. But all of the bills will be past their first policy committee by April 30th. So not a lot of days to go. And please call your state senator or assembly member if you're a fan of this. Yeah, that's it for me on the state section. I'll pass it off.
Thank you, Mark. Well, it's been a busy Measure HLA day. So what's going on? A few weeks ago, there was a draft implementation ordinance that passed a special Public Works Transportation Joint Committee meeting. That was February 26th. And that same ordinance passed today at full council with some caveats. We worked with our allies on some key amendments, and city planning is about to release a new draft of their standard elements for HLA. So first of all, what were the key amendments? Report back on how HLA can apply to metro projects, making sure that HLA applies to grant-funded projects not already under construction, eliminating a required appeals process within the city before someone could file a lawsuit, showing some of the benefits of the projects on the dashboard, not just the downsides, and making sure LADOT is the lead agency to implement HLA. This morning, at the last minute, by Tracy Park, who wasn't even present at her own committee meeting, this happened. And it essentially means that the city is now going from an optional appeals process to a mandatory appeals process before anyone can sue for compliance. We're not sure this is legal, but that did happen at the last minute, and it flew through council in 2 seconds. And so we'll get another bite at the apple when it comes back from the city attorney, but we were very disappointed to see this after the careful work with our allies and after Tracy wasn't at the committee meeting herself. Also, nearly simultaneously this morning, Metro delivered a 4-page, very aggressive letter to the council president, basically threatening to sue the city of Los Angeles if it makes Metro comply with Measure HLA. We have taken the position, and our attorneys believe it's has legal foundation, that HLA applies to metro projects, But I just think it's very sad to see our county transportation agency threatening legal action to comply with Measure HLA, when the whole point of Measure HLA, when you zoom out, is safer streets, more multimodal streets, things that our county transportation agency should be championing. So we're very, very sad to see this. And on all of our social media accounts, you can read the full letter if you wish. So what happens next? What council passed today will go back to the city attorney. And then she will come back with a hopefully final version that will go back to a joint Transportation Public Works Committee and then to full council. Once all of that is passed, the city will officially have an HLA implementation ordinance, and we'll have to start implementing it. Our attorneys are analyzing the Metro and appeal situation. We'll see what happens there. We don't know how long the city attorney is going to take to come back. Also, city planning is going to release revised standard elements. Just to remind you, we talked about this last time. These are the basic things the city has to do to comply with the mobility plan, depending on what network it is. This is guidance to city departments. It's very important. We were not happy with it. For example, they combined a class 2 bike lane and a bus lane. And they said that a shared bike bus lane is okay for class 2 bike lanes when necessary. We disagree. So the Street Standards Committee, which is kind of this esoteric committee that doesn't meet very often, will meet April 3rd at 2 p.m. to approve this. And city planning is likely to release another version of their standard elements next week. We're hoping to see some positive changes. On to the budget. If you didn't catch the council meeting today, Matt Szabo, the city administrative officer, said that LA is facing a $1 billion budget deficit. It's a very ugly picture. About 2 weeks ago, we sent this coalition letter that we talked about last time to the mayor's office, asking for prioritization on funding around HLA, Olympics projects, and road safety projects. This is a wide coalition, and a lot of them were backers of HLA to begin with. The mayor's budget that comes out next month is going to be key and set the tone. Given the city's budget deficit, it's going to be tough. But if we're going to really host the World Cup next year and the Olympics in 3 years, we need to get our act together, aside from the fact that people are dying in our streets every day. We need to fix that. Over to Josh to talk about neighborhood councils.
Thank you, Michael. So for anyone that does not know, neighborhood councils are 99 bodies that act as kind of the closest to the ground form of democracy here in Los Angeles. They lack a lot of formal power, but they're very influential when it comes to impacting land use decisions and transportation. So for our advocacy, it's really, really important to have supporters and advocates on these neighborhood councils. And neighborhood council elections are happening right now. And this is important both for voting in them and also in case you want to run for them. For voting, normal voter registration does not apply, which is pretty confusing. And so it's a separate application you have to do. And you can vote in them if you live, or you can run for neighborhood council if you live, work, worship, own property, or have kids in school in that neighborhood council and you're over 18. If you want to go forward, I think. And then to the next slide. These are the upcoming neighborhood councils that are the most urgent. So Region 12, you've already missed the window to request your ballot and you need to vote by March 25th. This is the San Pedro area. Region 9 is kind of South LA and Watts. You need to request your ballot by March 24th, which is in 5 days. Region 10 is South LA and Mid-City, and you need to request your ballot by March 31st. And Region 5 is Hollywood, and you need to request your ballot by April 7th. And on our website at streetsforall.org/2025 neighborhood council elections, you can apply for endorsements. We also have a long list of all of the upcoming deadlines for each neighborhood council. We also have a link so you can figure out what neighborhood council you're in. And we will continue to announce upcoming endorsements as we get closer to different elections. We're also going to talk about some wins and fails of the month. So the first win is that SB 695, which was a bill we passed a few years ago to asking Caltrans to release public data and information around its highway widening program. That data has now come out and it's now public. So the data covers the range from 2018 to 2023. And this information is really important because it allows us to hold Caltrans accountable, hold different agencies accountable. And highway widening, in case you don't know, is bad. It increases pollution, increases vehicle miles traveled. It does not usually reduce traffic. Often it makes traffic worse. And so the main kind of headline that came away from this analysis, which I guess is kind of a fail of the month, is that 553 new lane miles of highways were added over this time period, and 317 homes and 300 businesses were also removed. I'm going to pass it over to Kyle now.
Thanks, Josh. So we're super happy to report that the bus lane enforcement project is live, starting February 17th after a 60-day warning period. LA Metro was able to start issuing tickets, starting with two main corridors, the 212 and the 720, the two huge north-south corridors in the city. And the phase 2 warning period for the 70 and the Silver Line, the 910 and the 950, started last week. And so, just a heads up to anybody caught in the bus lane there, happy to see that. And tip of the cap also to our neighbors in Culver City, whose program starts tomorrow, actually, with a similar 60-day warning period, and the first citations planning to be issued on May 19th. Similar structures to each, you can pay online, but happy that the program exists. Over to Katrina, who's going to talk about the bad side of this.
Well, thanks so much, Kyle. Hi, everyone. Katrina Kaiser, they them pronouns on the steering committee. I'm here to talk about what's happening with the money that is supposed to come from the bus lane automated enforcement effort. Some of you who have been following this effort for a while might remember that the City of LA Transportation Committee passed a motion to use the money that comes from the automated bus lane enforcement specifically to go back into transportation infrastructure with a particular focus on safety, active transportation infrastructure, and particularly making sure that we can implement good first last mile solutions around areas where these bus lanes are in order to incentivize people to take them. The bad news is, if you go to the next slide, very recently, earlier this week or last week, the Budget and Finance Committee had a parallel item to use the bus lane violation enforcement money the same way that one would use any other parking violation revenue, and use it to fill holes in the general fund as opposed to using it for transportation infrastructure in particular. At Streets for All, we're really disappointed that the motion of the Transportation Committee was ignored. It speaks poorly about the internal functioning of the City Council if committee motions can get ignored and parallel committee motions cannot be hashed out in council as opposed to sneaking it in on consent. But stay tuned for more advocacy from us on this point. The next item to discuss is, a highlight from our LA City Controller, Kenneth Mejia, on city liability payouts. According to the data that both the City Controller has collected, as well as data that Streets for All has taken a look at in the budget, the amount of liability payouts in the traffic collisions category and the street services category are more than double what's been earmarked for Vision Zero work in the budget, or active transportation work, since Vision Zero is really decreasing in importance as a line item in the budget. As we know, if the city was able to dedicate more of its money to preventing streets from being unsafe in the first place, it would prevent these crashes, and it would prevent the city being asked to pay out these very high liability payments. So again, stay tuned for more advocacy on Streets for All on that front, and keep an eye on the budget. Over to Michael again.
Thanks. Two quick last things. Just wanted to express our frustration here. In 2015, a woman was killed crossing the street on Vista Del Mar. The city paid out a $9 million wrongful death lawsuit, horrible loss of life. 2017, under Mike Bonin, it was reconfigured. There was an outcry, mostly by people who didn't even live in Los Angeles. And the mayor forced Mike Bonin to revert the street to its previously dangerous conditions. In 2021, a mother was killed crossing the same street with her son. And a few days ago, a car on the same exact street was speeding and careened off the street and killed someone walking on the path below. This is the definition of insanity. The city has spent tens of millions of dollars paying out claims by dead people's families instead of fixing this street. And they caved to NIMBY forces, and it's just really tragic. Ending on a high note, this is a surprise win that even the team didn't know about, but I wanted to highlight it. We released today a bus riders delay study, data.streetsforall.org/blog/bus_delay. The headline is bus riders in LA are delayed more than 5 million minutes every weekday. And we break down how we got to this data. And we suggest really low-cost fixes to improve the bus rider experience throughout Los Angeles. Shout out to Josh and the whole data dev team who worked very hard on this. Shout out to our members club program. This work is a lot of work lately, and we would really appreciate it if you're able to consider joining. You get great benefits, streetsforall.org/members. And a quick preview for next month, we're going to have the Deputy Mayor of Infrastructure, Randall Winston, who reports to Mayor Bass, Wednesday, April 9th at 5 p.m. So I'm so excited to welcome now Congresswoman Laura Friedman from the 30th District. Laura is a longtime friend of Streets for All. She has lived in California for more than 3 decades. In Congress, she represents the 30th District, which includes Burbank, Glendale, West Hollywood, and parts of LA and Pasadena. In Congress, she serves on 2 key committees, the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Before joining Congress, we worked closely with her when she chaired the Assembly Transportation Committee and represented the 44th District. She really did build a reputation as a tireless advocate for the environment, housing, and transportation. She secured more than $60 million in funding for local projects like the Glendale Riverwalk, Griffith Park, and upgrades to the Glendale Central Library. And then 3 quick bills. She did a lot of great legislation on road safety, zero-emission vehicles, et cetera. Marquee bills included AB 43, which let cities lower speed limits, AB 2097, which got rid of parking requirements near transit, and AB 645, a bill that we proudly sponsored last year that legalized speed cameras. So welcome. Now I could say Congresswoman. And thank you for being here. I know your schedule was crazy and it wasn't easy.
Everybody, it's great to see you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. Thank you so much for being here.
Wonderful. Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much, Michael. It's always great to see you. I want to say hi to everyone at Streets for All. I'm really excited to join you today. We've been great partners over the years. And so meeting with you is like coming home. And just listening to you, I'm always in awe of the advocacy that you do and the work that you do and how important it is for active transportation, but just for mobility in general, for transit, for people who can't speak up for themselves, for people who just want to walk around their city safely. There's not a lot of groups that are as effective as Streets for All. So thank you so much. I'm happy to be able to spend a little time with you this evening to talk about our shared goals in transportation. And I want to, again, thank you for your work on Measure HLA, incredible heavy lift that you were able to do. The city now, because of you, is going to improve about 2,500 miles of streets, and you're doing it without raising taxes or fees. You're going to help with traffic congestion. You're going to help with air quality. You're going to help with safety. All of that is so important, and really appreciate your work of trying to take that to the county as well. And, I also want to acknowledge that you know how to build political capital. You knew how to do movement building and to bring in people from all over the county. And, that's what it takes to be successful. So thank you so much for that. So when I got elected, I didn't know when you get elected to Congress that the first thing you have to do is to then wage a second campaign to get on the committees that you want to get on. And my top choice of a non-exclusive committee was transportation and infrastructure to continue all the work that I do around mobility and climate. And I had to wage quite a battle over this, but I ended up being successful in getting on TNI. So I'm really excited about that. I was able to bring the ranking member of that committee, Rick Larson, to Los Angeles a couple weeks ago. We toured a under construction metro stop on the Purple Line extension. We had a press conference there to talk about the threats right now from the Trump and Musk administration, the very public threats and open threats to basically defund anything having to do with transit, anything having to do with active transportation, really anything they can get their hands on. but particularly transit and active transportation are in their crosshairs. We also brought him to the LA River to see the LA River bike path, and that was a project he knew nothing about. And he was really amazed to see the amount of people using that infrastructure on a weekday and just what we've done with the river, and really making an amenity and reconfiguring entire neighborhoods around the river as opposed to turning their back on it and reclaiming it as an important amenity for the community. So that was really happy to be able to do that. For our district, of course, mobility and transit remains a huge priority, as well as road safety, which is abysmal, as you know. But I'm sure you've talked about the Olympics coming and the Paralympics coming. We also have the World Cup and rugby, international rugby coming to Los Angeles. And, it was always sold to the city as a way of making improvements, particularly to mobility, that would remain permanent. And this administration is really putting all of that in doubt. So, we're going to need help with advocacy around the Olympics to make sure that the transit part of it is not forgotten, in the race to kind of get that done on time. We need, your help to continue to fund for metro expansion and for federal funding. And certainly to make sure that the mobility plan 2025 in the city of LA and then local street projects continue to get funded. And I will tell you that right now in my own city in Glendale, there's an all-out war on any kind of active transportation infrastructure. In fact, I just met with a former mayor today who was saying, "Oh God, everybody in Glendale just hates bike lanes, and people are gonna run on getting rid of bike lanes in Glendale instead for city council in a few months. Like it's gonna literally be the centerpiece of people's campaigns." So this is, still a continuing battleground. And people now see this not as just about safety, but about the culture wars. Unfortunately, that it's become a culture war issue to people. And I can say in my city in Glendale, we're losing that culture war right now. So I know it's maybe a little out of your primary jurisdiction, but I certainly would love to partner with you on anything having to do with any of these issues. They're tremendously important to me, and I know they are to you. And looking forward to continuing our partnership.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those kind words and that brief overview. We have some quick questions we want to ask you from the steering committee, and then there's a lot of audience members here that I'm sure would love to ask you questions as well. So I'm just gonna go straight ahead. The first one I think is a softball, maybe not. You're now a member of Congress. This DC must be so different than being a Democrat with a supermajority in both houses with a Democratic governor, where you can actually conceive of a bill, have it go in a semi-logical way through, and then get it signed. What has surprised you about Congress so far, maybe that you weren't expecting? And is a minority party in this environment able to have much influence at all?
No, the minority party has no influence that I've seen at this point. The Republicans will not allow bills to be heard. The one thing you can do is you can ask questions in committee. They can't stop that, but they can certainly stack the committee with partisan operatives. I will say transportation, I think that the chair tries to make it somewhat bipartisan. I mean, they always talk about that. They talk a really good game about it being like the one bipartisan committee. And people don't have the kind of vitriolic fights in that committee that are partisan the way you see in judiciary or in oversight. We haven't seen that in transportation, and I hope it doesn't come to that. There's a little bit of shade throwing, but so far it's been fairly civil. And on some issues, it's actually been somewhat bipartisan to some extent. So we'll see. But it doesn't mean that the Republicans are standing up for transit funding or standing up for funding science or any of the other things. They just talk about wanting to be bipartisan.
Thank you. Josh, over to you.
Yeah, great to have you here. So similar topic. It goes without saying that President Trump has a different set of transportation priorities compared to Biden. While the last 4 years saw an unprecedented amount invested in rail projects, complete streets, repairing damage caused by past decisions like freeway construction, I think we're probably heading towards something that's probably the opposite, with a lot of money flowing into freeways and stuff. How do you feel under President Trump about Metro's big capital projects like Sepulveda Transit Corridor, the LA River Bike Path, or basically any large capital project that isn't a highway happening in California. And I will preface, the next question is about high-speed rail. So this is kind of a part one, part two. And so big capital projects that are not high-speed rail.
Yeah, I think they've been really clear that they don't want to find any transit. There are transit projects in red
Laura,
areas.
I'm so sorry.
Particularly or mostly around
broke up.
Amtrak and freight.
Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. If you could just start the answer over, please.
Yeah. Okay. They've been pretty clear that they seem to like Amtrak. Amtrak goes to a lot of rural areas. It goes through a lot of red districts, but they've been pretty clear that they want to get rid of transit. They fired everyone at the Department of Transportation, and then they brought a bunch of them back, probably because FAA is under DOT. That might be the only reason. So I think that they would like to cancel all the transit projects. I think they're pretty clear about that. I don't think they're pretending otherwise. And they definitely want to get out of a lot of the infrastructure funding bill and not want to do that. Now, a lot of those projects are in red districts. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when Republicans start to squawk about projects in their districts being canceled. But transit, they're pretty clear they don't like transit. They don't want to fund any transit projects.
So is there any hope?
So I think that there's a real concern of them. It's a real concern that they're going to stop projects that are midstream, like the Purple Line. I wouldn't put it past them. And then the state would have to backfill it, or and the city, which means it would cost a lot more money for residents. They'd have to raise taxes or fees or do something. They also don't like California, and they're very clear about that. You can see that with they're talking about conditioning FEMA aid. So, between the two things, if they think it's a project that benefits California, they're going to want to get rid of it, or if it's transit anywhere.
Thank you. Over to Katrina.
Thanks. That was very sobering, and I'm sure it's going to become more sobering with this next question. Because as you and I think others here might remember, a few weeks ago, the transportation secretary went to LA Union Station to announce basically a pretext for killing California high-speed rail. It was a very high-profile announcement that kind of happened at the last minute with lots of counter protesters supporting mobility. And of course, there's little doubt the project is dramatically over budget and way past the timeline promised to voters in, the mid-2000s at this point. Streets for All still is standing behind it as a vital project. And I know that, we've had dialogue with you in your previous role about high-speed rail. A couple years later, how do you think the high-speed rail got to this point, and what hope is there to complete it between the Bay and LA under this administration, or in general in our lifetimes?
Well, it was woefully underfunded for what it was supposed to do from the get-go, and that was really the big problem. It was never going to get built for the money that voters were told it was going to be built with. Not when you have to go through the Tehachapis and, buy all that land and, farmland and everything else. I still think that high-speed rail is worth doing around California. I'm sorry they didn't start with San Diego, Los Angeles. It's a very heavily traveled rail line already. It's too close to fly, but too far to drive, in my opinion, because I always take the train down. And then you've got the Encinitas tracks that are falling into the ocean over and over and over again. And it would have demonstrated proof of concept. So I think it would have been more successful and certainly would have had a lower price tag. But nothing we can do about that now. We've put a lot of money into this project, and we need to have something that we can show the taxpayers. That's my feeling about it. We need to have something there. And I actually think that there's still quite a bit of value to having something from Bakersfield to connecting into the Bay Area. Given the number of people that have moved into those areas and still work in the Bay Area, and just the people, number of people that go back and forth between those routes. If you live in Bakersfield, if you live in Fresno, you still want to get to the Bay Area, and you don't have great, you have Caltrain in some places, but there's a lot of places that are far from Caltrain too. So there still could be a lot of value towards that, of getting that finished, but they don't even have the money to finish that at this point, and they don't know how they're connecting into the Bay Area yet. The idea is to try to get close to Ace and be able to go into the East Bay, but that's not optimal, right? So I think they need to really think a lot about that and how they're going to fund that connection.
I agree. I've taken the San Joaquins from Bakersfield and between Bakersfield and Sacramento, and there's definitely room to speed up that rail corridor.
Yeah.
Over to Mark.
Congresswoman, it's a pleasure to see you again. This question is rooted about the things that really keeps me up at night the most, which is that California is projected to lose the 4 congressional seats after the 2030 census, while states like Arizona, Texas, and Florida are projected to gain around 8 or 9. And a major failure is really California building enough housing, especially in transit-rich areas. And the California legislature, as you know, as a longtime member, has immense power over zoning and housing policy, and yet progress remains incredibly slow. And I'll just add, as someone working in the building this year, I actually think it looks like even slower this year than in previous years. And so my question for you, and I'll just kind of note that Congressman Ro Khanna came on in support of SB 79, our sponsored bill with Senator Wiener. But as a freshman member of Congress from California, and for those of you who are just in the state legislature and just elected to DC, do you feel like you have a role in pushing your former colleagues in Sacramento to take housing production seriously? And what role should really the California congressional delegation play in ensuring that our state doesn't continue to hemorrhage representation in Washington? I would be really sad and remiss to see in 2030 all of you amazing Congress members that we just elected in having to fight each other for your seats because we've lost congressional seats.
No, thanks, Mark. It's a great question. And I actually think that one of the reasons the Democrats didn't do well is because we haven't taken housing seriously enough. It's the biggest cost driver for people in Los Angeles. And so many people have a dream of owning a home, and that's just out of reach, right? For middle class people, for young families at this point. So as you know, I've done a lot of work around housing, probably even more than I've done around transportation. So you don't have to sell me on an abundance mentality. The first caucus that I joined when I came to Congress, even before I was sworn in, was the Abundance Caucus. And I, did a nice press conference where I was the first freshman to join. I may even be the only one. I don't know. But, it's really important to me. We have a couple of housing related bills that we're working on right now. So I think there is some room. I mean, most of what the federal government does around housing is funding. And the other thing that they defunded in this horrible CR bill that the Senate just passed is affordable housing. A lot of it was defunded through that. And renters programs were also defunded in that bill. So I think the Democrats should lean in on housing production. And certainly happy to weigh in with my former colleagues on that. I always did in the past. I know there's some housing champions up there, but it's scary for people. But what I would remind them, and you can remind them, is I ran on housing, and I did some super bold bills that got me a lot of enemies amongst people who are housing hesitant in Los Angeles, and they were very angry at me. And I still won my race, even with people who were former friends, former supporters who didn't support me anymore because I was pro housing. So, I think maybe I would certainly use that as an example that running on housing can get you a lot of people who care a lot about housing, which is a ton of my constituents.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Pass it to Kyle.
Thanks, Mark. Congresswoman, thanks. Really great to have you on again. So let's talk Olympics. In just 3 short years, which will probably feel like tomorrow to some, LA is going to be hosting the Olympics. And of course, this was originally billed as a no-build Olympics. And as of today, we still need a ton of metro improvements, BRT improvements, rail extensions, and improvements to the roads themselves to achieve that car-free vision that has been championed since the announcement. So what hope do you see for federal funding in this regard to help the city pull off the Olympics smoothly, specific to infrastructure?
It's a good question, and I don't know because I've heard nothing. Like I've mentioned the Olympics several times in the TNI committee and not gotten sort of any response from anybody. I think the Republicans, I don't think it's like they hate the Olympics or anything, but I think LA is toxic in the administration's eyes. And so I just, even though it's an incredibly selfish, way of thinking about the Olympics because this will reflect on the entire country, not Los Angeles. But I think if this Olympics was being held in a red state, there would be a very different level of engagement and funding commitments from this administration. Although who knows, they're so crazy that it's hard to even know. But I wouldn't count on the federal government coming in and raining a bunch of cash down on LA to try to help with this. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I wouldn't count on it.
Totally. I think a lot of us probably feel the same way. Thank you. Michael,
Sure.
to you.
I mean, I guess the $1 million question is, do you think we can pull off the Olympics without federal help? The city has a $1 billion budget deficit.
Yeah.
It's pretty ugly.
I don't know what gets paid by sponsors. I honestly don't know what the economics are like. I think if the city had to cover all that, it would be a huge hit on the city. So there's gonna have to be some very creative thinking around this. And I think we're really behind on planning.
Yep. Okay, on to congestion pricing. We've been watching with really jealous eyes. Congestion pricing work absolute wonders in New York City. Traffic into Manhattan's down, emissions are down, street safety is up, business sales tax revenue, foot traffic to businesses is up. I don't think I've ever seen a policy work so well so soon out of the gate. Yet, just like high-speed rail, the Trump administration is trying to kill the program. Metro LA is also studying congestion pricing, and we think the downtown LA cordon would make a ton of sense as the most transit-rich part of our region. It could also raise a ton of money to improve transit in LA, which could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. What are your thoughts on congestion pricing in Los Angeles? And do you think there's any hope for it at all under approval under a Trump administration? Or do we just have to wait another 3.5 years?
Well, if we're going to really electrify our vehicles, which is certainly in doubt now with the Trump administration because they're trying to defund anything having to do with electrification, I would have said if that wasn't the case, we'd have to think about alternate ways of funding roads, including congestion pricing. I think that we maybe have sort of more time now than we did before because, he's all about like all gasoline all the time and no fuel standards and drill baby drill and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that it's, that San Francisco has got a pilot congestion pricing pilot, I believe, running. LA should think about it. I mean, the thing about congestion pricing is it works if you give people good options. New York City has a lot of good options for people who are commuting in, better than driving in for sure. LA doesn't have that yet. So you've got to also make sure that the timing is right on it so it doesn't just seem punitive to people who can't afford to pay it. So that means that whoever is gonna be priced out of driving into these congested areas have got to have an option that is better for them, that it saves them time, that's less money, that's more convenient, that feels safe, because otherwise it's just going to look incredibly punitive and be really unpopular. So I would just be really careful to make sure that as you advocate for congestion pricing, we also advocate for fully funding those options that'll make the congestion pricing successful.
Thank you. Over to Kyle.
Thanks, Michael. So another lightning rod on the topic of electrification. You mentioned how difficult it'll be to really get anything through. And so a small question about e-bike rebates. And maybe this one will help us understand your perception of the level of fidelity that the opposition, will work at. And so obviously there have been some attempts in recent years to get these tax credits through towards the purchase of e-bikes, just like we have with electric cars, and, in the effort to stall it in Congress. In case anybody doesn't know, e-bikes are outselling electric cars, and are a really great solution for a lot of the local trips. And so, do you think there is any hope of attaching this legislation for an e-bike rebate to a larger bill and somehow get it through, slip it through in this climate? And if not,
Maybe, but look,
Yeah.
they literally have flagged the word bicycle in searches to go through, just like with DEI, it's bicycles, DEI, climate. There's a few other keywords that they've put into programs to go through and identify any program that has that as a keyword and to exit out. So
Why do you
that's the
think
level of hatred.
Why do you think bicycles? This is off the fly, but why have bicycles become such a culture war thing? I mean, it's odd.
They see it as just part of they see it as something they can peg to elitism, to coastal elites, educated people, and to poor people, quite honestly. And they know that like something that's very scary to people is that a message that sells for the Republicans has been that Democrats want to take things away from you. They want to take away your gas stove. They want to take away your car, your truck. They want you to, have to recycle. They don't want you to have plastic anymore. Like they have this narrative that we're making people's lives really difficult for no reason. And the bicycle infrastructure is taking away lanes from cars, right? It's taking away your ability to get to work really fast. Even having those people on the road, people who aren't them, their voters aren't riding bikes to work, as far as they're concerned. They're driving pickup trucks. So even having to swerve around them is annoying. So I'm just taking a guess here, but they've really managed to make that part of the culture wars. We haven't sold it as keeping little kids safe on their way to school. They see it as 15-minute city. It's this sort of communist idea that we're all going to have to walk to work, that we're going to take their cars away.
Interesting. It's fine. Maybe
That's what I think.
a good t-shirt idea in there somewhere. Over to you, Katrina.
Thanks, Kyle. Our final curated question for you is hopefully ending on a note of hope if we can muster it. The midterm elections are 20 months away, and retaking Congress has to be a top priority for the Democratic Party. What do you plan to do between now and then to help make the case to voters? And how optimistic are you that Democrats will be able to retake Congress in 2026?
No, it's a great question. So that is the goal, right? Project 2027 is the goal that we need. All we need is three. Remember, three seats. Well, actually five, because unfortunately we lost 2 members in the last couple of weeks to unexpected deaths. But those should be blue seats. So we need 3 seats. It'd be nice to have 10, just because you need that cushion, because you never know, who's going to kind of go sideways on you on important votes. But that's got to be the hope, because then at least we have a chance at some of this. How hopeful am I? I think that if the American public starts to really understand what they're doing, that we have a really good chance, because so many of the things that they are doing are deeply unpopular. Taking away Medicaid, attacking Social Security, taking away veterans programs and support for veterans. Even, getting rid of park rangers is, turns out is actually very unpopular with the American public. They're getting away with it because people don't realize what they're doing, and they are very untruthful. This is an administration that lies constantly about things, saying they're not attacking Medicaid while they cut tens of thousands of Medicaid, employees, saying they're not hurting veterans at the same time they're cutting tens of thousands of VA nurses and medical professionals, saying that they like housing at the same time they're cutting, millions of dollars out of money to go to affordable housing. If we can get that message out and show the American public in real terms what they're actually doing and the effect that it has on the American people, not just on people maybe they don't care about, immigrants or poor people, but your grandmother, because where else is she going to go and live? Because the nursing homes are funded usually through Medicaid. Veterans who are heroes to our country. These are people who are very, who we all care about. Everybody cares about them, Republicans and Democrats. And I actually think we have more shared values than we believe. And Republicans don't want people suffering unnecessarily. They don't want kids going hungry. They don't want sick people who are poor to not get any medical care. Republicans care about all that too. So just getting that message out about what's actually happening to show that Donald Trump and Elon Musk they lie. And that what they are doing are really harmful to just ordinary Americans. I think if we get that message out, I think we win. So it's making sure that people are out there not backing down, not getting tired, not being exhausted. They're trying to make us exhausted. They're trying to demoralize us, that we are going to be strong and we're not going to be demoralized. We're not going to fight amongst ourselves. We're going to be united, and we're going to care about the American public and put them first and center real people. And they already have been struggling, and they're going to struggle a lot more under the policies of this administration.
Congresswoman, I agree with that analysis. I just want to ask you before audience questions, do you see a path forward for Democrats messaging better than they did in the last election? Because
one of the problems is that at this point, the Republicans really own alternative media. And, we've got to find people to move into those spaces. I'm not a podcaster. So who are the people out there who are going to be folks, bearing this message about what's really happening? They've done an amazing job of creating a right-wing infrastructure. And it's not just right wing, it's extremists. I mean, it's a real extremist infrastructure that convinced people that vaccines are harmful and that Jews control the world, and all the things that's out there in social media land. But we don't have that same infrastructure on our side to just tell the truth, actually, and to just center like ordinary people and to make them understand that that this administration doesn't have their best interests at heart. That this administration is all about lining the pockets of billionaires.
Okay, we've got about 11 minutes left. I want to get through as many audience
Yeah,
questions.
and I don't actually have 11 minutes. I have maybe 7 minutes at the most. Okay.
We'll get through as many as we can. First question: the CEO of Amtrak was fired today. Do you have any insight into what the administration wants to do with Amtrak and the motivations?
I don't have any insight because this administration is totally non-communicative with Congress and with the Democrats. And so I have no idea. They clearly hate transit. I can't imagine they love Amtrak. They're cutting pretty much everything they can cut in terms of, they're basically dismantling the federal government in real time. And that's every single piece of it. And Amtrak is a piece of that.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Do you think the federal government should do more on automobile design to increase safety for pedestrians? Unfortunately, only your colleagues in the Senate will be able to question the incoming NHTSA administrator, but wondering what questions you might ask, and is there any hope to increase pedestrian safety through better automobile design?
Yeah, I actually asked this question in the T&I committee about 2 weeks ago, and did ask about pedestrian, design to center pedestrians and cyclists. And I was sort of told, yeah, they're thinking about it, they're looking at it, but that was it.
Okay.
And I agree with you. I think there should be. We're not going to get any regulations. We're not going to get any regulations under this administration and under this Congress. They're all about deregulating. I mean, they believe I think they get rid of seatbelts, they would. So we're not going to get it under this administration, but it's something that I'm very committed to fighting for. It's tremendously important. And I do think the public raising awareness about this issue is important. And then you do that. And I know there's, plenty of people out there that have been raising this issue. And I think we need to be very loud about it.
Thank you. What upcoming metro project are you most excited about?
I'm excited about the Purple Line extension. I think it's a game changer. I'm excited about all of them.
Why do you think it's a game changer? A little bit more.
We're in a very dense area with a ton of people working. We don't have great connectivity with our metro system right now. And so this gives a really good chance for people to just get, get through a dense area that's, a real slog by bus to get them there much faster, and moving around the city. It goes into some of our densest neighborhoods, densest areas.
Yep.
It's in my district, which makes it the most important, more important than anything anywhere else.
I'm very excited about it too. Next question. Is there a big disconnect between the transportation issues we talk about in California versus the national level? And do you think there are opportunities at the federal level to implement permitting reform to advance an abundance agenda?
Well, I will say this is one area where the Republicans actually will probably see eye to eye in a lot of stuff. They definitely would like to see permitting reform, probably beyond where even I'd be comfortable. So I do think that but the permits that need to be reformed, you're not talking about NEPA. We don't have the ability to, federally to change CEQA, and we don't have the ability to change local permits. So that's why a lot of the work is going to have to still be local, because NEPA doesn't really come into play with housing that I know of. It does with transportation projects. So with large transportation projects, sure. But we already have done work to align CEQA with NEPA, so you don't have to do those analyses twice. We did that I think a couple of years ago or last year in California. And NEPA is not as strict as CEQA.
I'm not sure anyone's told Metro Los Angeles that yet, because even when they do CEQA exemptions, they're still doing hundreds of pages of NEPA work.
I think we aligned them. I could be wrong, but I remember that we did some legislative work around aligning them so that they didn't have to do both. We did it as part of Newsom's, I think we did it when we did the Newsom's infrastructure package, but honestly, someone should go and double check because I could be wrong about that.
This next question is about national versus state politics. We kind of already asked you that, but I guess I'll just reframe this question. Are you super frustrated right now in DC? Are you like working on a bunch of ideas that you're going to unleash in a year and a half when we retake Congress? Like, what is your mentality?
I am working on ideas. I'm very excited to be there. I love being there. I am extremely worried about our country. And I would be just as worried whether I was in DC or not in DC, except that I feel like in DC, you realize that it's even worse than people hear about. You know, I have a lot more stakeholders coming in telling me that they've lost all their funding that don't want to be public because they're so worried about this vindictive administration, like never giving them money back. So the thing that's frustrating is just how much worse it is than I would have thought if I wasn't there. But I'm very excited to be in the fight.
All right. One last question, then any final thoughts? Bus lane and BRT projects in our region are often watered down as Metro caves to NIMBYs. What can we do to prevent every local community from vetoing regional improvements?
I think that we need to move faster and have less process. And, you know, the thing that's nice about buses is that you can unbus the lanes if you need to. So it's not like a train track where you're doing this huge investment you're never going to take out again. You're with bus infrastructure normally, not always, but a lot of times you're talking about paint. And so, you know, trying to have a little less process so you can move faster and just get stuff done. And then just hope that the public really loves it by the time they get used to it.
All right. In the last 30 seconds, any final words you'd like to leave the audience with?
You know, being in DC, one of the things that was a surprise to me is how great their bus infrastructure is. And I love taking the bus there. And when I come here, I talk to people about what a great quality of life it is in Washington, D.C. to be able to get around by train and by bus. And you know, if we stop using New York City as an example because it scares everybody who doesn't want to live in New York City and start using San Diego and San Francisco and Washington, D.C. and Seattle and other places, I think it feels better for people. But that was something that did surprise me. And, you know, just saying like it's a better quality of life when you go to Paris, it's not like you go there and want to get in the car, right? Part of the attraction of going to these cities is that the mobility is so easy for everybody. And I also think in terms of abundance and density, that our problem in Los Angeles is that we've done density so badly over the years. And we just have, like when we do density, we overbuild. There are buildings that are overbuilt and they just look awful and nobody wants to live in them. And they don't have the infrastructure to support a walkable, bikeable lifestyle around them. And so we don't have really great examples to show people. And we've got to just, continue to find ways of rezoning and building really good density that everybody wants to live in. And then expanding outward. And we have some examples, but we just don't have enough of them. So it's hard, and doing the tough work, like when I did parking reform work, it took a couple years. When I did speed cameras, it took 4 years. I think just knowing that it's going to take a long time to do things that are meaningful. It's going to take years and years and years. It's not going to be a fast victory, but when you do it, it's transformational, and that's why you do it. And it makes the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that much easier. So I really appreciate all of you for your stick-to-itness and being in the fight and your vision. And this is about having a vision and being there to fight for that vision. And I think our side is winning. I really do. I think that more and more people understand why this is important. So keep fighting. I will be there fighting alongside you, whether I'm, physically here or physically in DC. My heart is always in Los Angeles and in my district and right squarely aimed at these same issues that you all fight for every day. So thanks so much for having me here. And I will be seeing you all again soon.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. And we're behind you. Keep fighting the good fight. We really appreciate it. And with that, I think she is off. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Luke, thank you. Luke Clip, everybody, the Congresswoman staffer. Thank you for making that happen. I know you were juggling a lot, and let's keep up the fight. Good to see everybody.